What's good, folks, family, friends, loved ones, enemies, frenemies, wizards, witches, muggles, mudbloods, people of Middle Earth, to a special emergency edition of Disguise coverage, the only podcast that gives you an equal amount of blueberries in each muffin, presented by the best pizza in Buffalo, New York, and that is One Pie Pizza. Find the online menu in the episode show notes, whether here on YouTube or whichever podcasting app or platform you are listening to this show on. I'm your host, Anthony Prohaska. Find me on Twitter at pro__ant. That's pro2_ANT. Find me on Blue Sky at proant. No underscores there, just PROANT. In this emergency edition of Disguise coverage. If you don't know, now you know. The Buffalo Bills have hired Jim Leonhard as their defensive coordinator. Currently, it's funny. I always he sticks out so much to me as the Wisconsin defensive coordinator and what he did there that I always forget exactly what he was doing in Denver these past years. But he was in 2025, the assistant head coach and defensive pass game coordinator for the Broncos in 2025. 2024, he was the DB's coach and pass game coordinator there. Previous year, 2023, really hot name in coaching circles, potentially jumping from college to the NFL. He ended up kind of taking some time off to a degree, was a senior football analyst for Illinois. But his big stead, where he really started to build a rep as a defensive mind, schematically, structurally, philosophically, was done at Wisconsin. He was there from 2016 through 2022. He was their DB's coach in 2016. He was their defensive coordinator, along with being the DB's coach from 2017 to 2022. And then he was their interim head coach in 2022. I did a large deep dive into Jim Leonhard this past Tuesday in a Disguise coverage in the back half of the episode. So if some of you watch that, tune into that, you'll hear some pieces that I talked about in that episode. But now that it's official, I thought, let's go live, let's react, let's get people's thoughts, questions, comments, concerns, engagement, all of that stuff. As always, super chats get priority. One, because I respect the monetary donation. Two, the color distracts me from my notes and gets me focused on something. Oh, I got to stop because we got a super chat already. Oh, one, thank you for being here. Two, thank you for the super chat. And the comment is just straight, let's go, with an exclamation point. New stadium, new defensive identity. I love that. I love that. I love that. We're 1,000% going to be talking about that defensive identity, what it means structurally and schematically for the Bills, what you can expect to see, but also tying into that quote unquote new defensive identity. What does it mean for the current personnel? What does it mean, defensively? What does it mean for future personnel and stuff like that? Because there's not exactly, as we talked a little bit in Tuesday's show, it's not exactly a complete seamless fit or transition from Sean McDermott's defense to Jim Leonhard's defense, right? There are some kind of oval shaped pegs that are going to go into some round holes. There's some square pegs that have to go into a round hole. What do you do? All that kind of stuff. I see this answer from Cope, which I love, who says the tree never comes down. It's a general holiday tree, not a Christmas tree. I'm guessing somebody earlier in the episode said, why is there? Oh, yeah. Rick said, bro, it's almost February. You can take a Christmas tree down. Christmas trees stay up all year round, especially the little one. I am taking the big one down once January ends. I wasn't expecting to do another show this week after the ones during the week, so I was supposed to take it down over the weekend, but I wasn't expecting to do a show. So next week, this tree will go down, and then this tree will get moved over there, and it'll be decorated all in red for a Valentine's Day tree. But Cope, I appreciate you. You understand the assignment. You recognize where we are. Buffalo Bills, yeah, today, earlier, roughly maybe an hour or so ago, announced the hiring of Jim Leonhard. It's funny now because I want to pull up one of my tweets from Joe Brady's presser. I thought that was also, too, I wanted to go live, kind of tie this into some of the things we heard in the presser from Joe Brady the other day. And forgive me as I scroll. I want to grab exactly what he said. That's right. Okay, so early, Brandon Beane, I should say, leads off. And Joe Brady said some things defensively as well. But Brandon Beane gets up at the podium, does the kind of, I don't know, like minute and a half, 2-minute intro, like to set up Joe Brady coming to the podium. And in that, he spoke, it wasn't just like, hey, we're excited to have Joe. Hey, let me introduce the new head coach of the team. We're ecstatic, blah, blah, blah. There was some of that, right? But he specifically spoke on what Joe Brady wants in his defense. And he spoke about that in the opening. He talked about some things they learned through this process about Joe, about themselves, all these things. But he spoke about that specifically. And I wanted to read that quote. He said, quote, so this is Brandon Beane. Beane said, quote, but what I and our team but what I and our team learned through this process was Joe's vision for how he would run an entire football team, and specifically his thoughts on how our defense would play under Joe if he was given this job. He wants a defense that attacks opposing QBs and play callers pre-snap and post-snap, a defense that dictates to the offense. Now, end quote. The now wasn't part of the quote. I'm saying now. You might hear that and say, of course, that's what all defenses should do. Like, why is this notable? What's the big deal? It's notable for a couple of reasons. One, Sean McDermott's defense, for the most part, I think they were a bit more aggressive than they get credit for, but they were not necessarily or regularly or consistently a play on the front foot type of defense. They were not, hey, it's going to be blitzing and pressing and we're attacking, we're doing all these things. I think a lot of fans use the soft zone moniker over and over again. I think that kind of gets misconstrued, but that's a conversation for another time in terms of what a soft zone means or how it was played or relevant to the Bills. But, the Bills were more reactive as a defense than they were front foot and dictating as a defense, right? And so you hear that quote from Brady, and I think that should be kind of music to fans' ears, but it also ties in very well with a quote from Jim Leonhard. This is one of my favorite quotes of his. It's from a coaching clinic of his several years ago when he was still at Wisconsin. So you heard that, right? From what, Beane said about Brady's vision for the defense. He wants a defense that attacks opposing QBs and play callers pre-snap and post-snap, a defense that dictates to the offense. And then you hear this quote that I'm about to read from Jim Leonhard from several years ago, where Jim Leonhard says, quote, I never want to be a counterpuncher. I always want us to have things in our game plan that we can dictate the flow to an offense. You need these offenses to have to go over to the sideline and find an answer. And the more flexibility you have within your scheme and the more ways you have to be that, throwing that jab or throwing some of those uppercuts on them, then they have to go make adjustments and not just attack, which is what they all want to do. And I thought, that's a big part of Leonhard's identity and philosophy, which we're going to get into as we go forward in this episode. But I heard that little breadcrumb at the presser, and, maybe it was just wishful thinking on my part because I've wanted Jim Leonhard as the Bills defensive coordinator for several years. I've been tweeting about it, I think, since 2023 or 2022, something like that. It just aligns so well. Leonhard's vision and philosophy and scheme and structure and how he runs the defensive side of the ball, it aligns so well with that quote from Beane on what Brady said he wanted in defense, but it also just aligns and applies very, very well to how you need to play defense in today's modern NFL in terms of the flexibility or the multiplicity, being able to adjust, dictating to an offense, right? Changing pre to post snap pictures while still being sound in your fundamentals and your calls and your identity. There's so much that is required of a defense today because the rules really do skew heavily towards the offense, and offenses like that Jim Leonhard quote mentioned, they like to attack. They want to play on the front foot, but you need to make them go back to the tablet or the iPad or whatever, you have on the sideline and be looking at stuff and trying to figure out, oh, what was that coverage rotation I didn't see post snap? How did that free runner come through? And there's more things than I'm just giving a couple like low hanging fruit examples. You need offenses in game to have to react to be like, okay, we got punched in the face. Now, how do we not get punched in the face again? Right? You need more of that. The Bills defense was more, okay, under Sean McDermott, the Bills defense was more, okay, let's go out. Let's kind of play what we're going to play. We'll see what the offense does, and then we'll kind of tailor things as we go forward. That's really kind of been, that was the MO last year, even a bit this year. I thought they, did well even within that, especially this year. I've talked so much about the changes in blitz rate and, both run blitz and pass blitz rates from the first half versus the second half of games for the Buffalo Bills, especially when Sean McDermott got his teeth more into the defense, taking a little more over from Bobby Babich. We saw good adjustments, good game plans. I know the Denver game, what happened towards the end of the fourth quarter, but think about what it was through the heavy majority of the third and fourth quarter. The Bills defense in the first half was kind of like, in the second half, they were all over Denver, smothering them, suffocating them, very little room to breathe. We saw that a lot in the second half of games for the Bills defense, where they would get into halftime and be like, okay, this is what's happening. Let's pivot. But at times it would be like, well, they're pivoting, but they've already given up 21 points, or you've given up 20 plus in general, or teams have 300 yards on you already and they're moving the ball up and down the field and you look gash and it's like, okay, can you still pivot? Is there enough time? It would be nicer to kind of have that mentality or that matchup mindset early in the game to not get down or not give the team 20 plus points and be able to play into things a little bit more. Jim Leonhard is matchup based. Let's go into the game, build things for that opponent week to week while still being within the identity and scheme of the defense, right? But tailoring it more to being matchup specific to a specific opponent, which one I like overall and I prefer, but two, that works much better in the playoffs. You think about these defensive coordinators that have really made their name for the past several years in the NFL. Again, low-hanging fruit examples, Steve Spagnuolo, Lou Anarumo, right? Known for these big game matchup defenses, these defenses that get into the playoffs and they have an offense's entire catalog from the season on tape. And they know, okay, this is how you like to punch. This is what you do. Okay, you're, a right-handed haymaker type of dude. We're going to tie your right hand behind your back. And then we're going to attack your left and kind of see what you can do. Jim Leonhard is built into that mold, or built from that mold, or cut from that cloth, I should say. And that's really exciting. Again, it's good for football in general, regular season football in general, but especially in the playoffs, right? Where a field goal could sink you. Some little minuscule 3 points that happens in the first quarter might be the difference between you surviving and advancing or you going home and booking a trip to Cancun. Points are at a premium. First downs are at a premium. Every yard, every point matters. So getting someone that is a believer in, tailoring those matchup specific game plans and is also very good at it, I just think that matters a ton in the playoffs. That's been my biggest gripe with the McDermott defense. I think a lot of folks would echo that as well. I think on the whole, Sean McDermott's been a good defensive mind and good defensive play caller and coordinator for the Bills. But come playoff time, when you're going against the best of the best and your whole catalog is out there to be scouted and attacked, you would kind of see the cracks a little bit. And you would see some things fall through those cracks and you would start to see, they're not really able to hold toe to toe. And I think that was because they were a bit more reactive than kind of playing on the front foot and attacking. All right. I want to scroll through and grab some comments. Great comment here. A question from Joe. Joe says, and I have a question. Which players on this roster do you believe would translate immediately to his scheme, and which players are the odd men out? So we're going to talk about that. Essentially have two segments for this episode. I want to talk about Leonhard's scheme, structure, and identity or philosophy as a defensive coach and a defensive mind. And then on the back end, we're going to talk about the roster, which players, like I alluded to earlier, are like, okay, somewhat of a round peg and a round hole. Okay, oval peg, round hole. Ooh, square peg, round hole. We're going to talk about that. And also maybe why it's not, I'm going to kind of generalize it now, but we're going to get into specifics on the back end. I don't think this is too crazy. Again, it's not seamless, but the Bills had to add to this defensive roster and their defensive personnel grouping this offseason anyway. You look at who the UFAs are on the edge, on the interior, at linebacker, safety is a question. You already had to add bodies to the defensive side of the ball, even if you stayed with the exact same structure and scheme. Even if McDermott and Babbitt stayed, nothing changed. You still needed to add a couple edges, a couple interior defensive linemen, couple linebackers, a starting safety, maybe another safety, like probably, depending on what happens with Dorian Strong, a corner three, all this stuff. You already had to add guys. So it's not crazy to think, okay, now they just need to add different body types and positional archetypes, but we are 1,000% going to get into that. Oh, and now I see super chats. Carl, what's up, Carl? Thank you for being here. Thank you for the super chat. Carl says, so our coaching staff is coming together really quickly. Joe Brady as head coach, Pete Carmichael as offensive coordinator, Jim Leonhard as defensive coordinator, Jeff Rodgers as special teams coach. All we need to fill is offensive line coach, right? No, I saw it yesterday, but I didn't dive into it because I had a hell of a day. They brought in, we'll say Pat Meyer from the Pittsburgh Steelers. He was the Steelers offensive line coach the past couple of years, or not even past couple of years. Definitely last season, but let me kind of go into I've got some notes on him, but I don't know where they are on my thing. Yeah, he was, that's what I thought. Steelers O-line coach from 2022 to 2025, Panthers O-line coach from 2020 to 2021, Chargers O-line coach and run game coordinator from 2017 to 2019. And then he was a Buffalo Bills offensive assistant in 2015 and 2016. Obviously, he's got a longer resume after that. He's 53 years old. He's been around the block a little bit, but yeah, they brought in the Steelers offensive line coach for them. I actually think I also believe they need to address wide receivers coach still, with Adam Henry being gone. I'm in the super chat, so feel free to anybody put in the comments are wrong, but they need to address the wide receivers coach. I've been so focused on wanting Jim Leonhard, like I've had blinders for everything else, but they need to address wide receivers coach, I believe. And then Jamil Adai leaving. to go to the Dolphins. I believe they need to address their corners coach or DB's coach, unless Pellegrino is going to take on more. I believe they have to address that as well. Comment here. I don't know how to pronounce the name. Smith and something. Thank you for being here. Thank you for the super chat. The comment or the question is, does Brady being a first-time head coach without insulating himself with any head coaching experience coordinators concern you at all? A little bit. Not too much though. I think Carmichael has been around the block a bunch as an offensive mind, as an offensive coordinator, and being in the Sean Payton system for so long, and with his experience, I don't think it'd be nice if someone had the direct correlation of head coaching experience. But I think if you have guys who have enough experience, guys who have been around the block and they know what it's like to put in a game plan, to execute on game day, to adjust on game day, I think Carmichael is a step in that direction. That was my big question for the OC position. Would Brady grab somebody who is more install and game plan based during the week, or would he grab somebody who is more of a help from a game day management standpoint while he was the CEO of the team as the head coach? And that I think Carmichael has got a foot in both of those camps a little bit. So it concerns me a little, but I think Carmichael is good enough that you'll be fine with his experience. Leonhard, I think, can run the entire defensive side of the ball by himself with what he did at Wisconsin, being their interim head coach, and then learning even further under Vance Joseph with his time in Denver. So no, I think it concerns me a little, but I think Carmichael is enough of a support system that he'll be good on the offensive side. I think Leonhard can run the defensive side, and you'll be good. But I think this is a very fair question, a very fair thought. Brad, thank you for being here. Thank you for the super chat. Brad says, so would you say Leonhard's defense is more about actually beating the offense, whereas McDermott's D was more about waiting for the offense to make a mistake and capitalize? Ooh, I don't want to boil it down to just that, but I think that's kind of a fair way to look at it. I think Leonhard's defense is more attack based. And I hate using that verbiage because I feel like it makes it seem like, oh, so what are they? It's like that Brian Flores, are they blitzing 50% of the time? But it is more the way I like to say it. Yeah, like playing on the front foot, beating the offense, trying to use their protection rules against them. Changing pre to post snap pictures, like I read in that quote, making them go to the sideline, having to adjust and figure some things out. I do think, it is more of, hey, we know what you do well, so we're going to come out of the gate and try and mitigate that, and then put your weaknesses under a microscope and expand upon those and attack. Whereas I do think McDermott's defense was, hey, we're going to come out, we're going to be ourselves, and then we're going to see what you do. Try and make you make a mistake, try and make you go the length of the field, counting on the idea of like, hey, eventually they'll get a penalty, or eventually they'll turn the ball over and make a mistake, and then we pounce. Which is funny too, because when McDermott would put in game plan specific things, they worked. Like the again, low-hanging fruit example I always use, the odd mirror stuff that they would use against Kansas City, that they would use against mobile quarterbacks. That was matchup specific. And when they did that against Kansas City a couple years ago, I was like, okay, we're going to start to see more of that. And then other games, it was still just like, no, we're going to kind of be ourselves and be ourselves and see what comes of it. So I do think, I think McDermott's defense, a little bit about waiting for the offense to make a mistake and capitalize, but I think more of coming out, seeing what you're going to do. So again, boxing analogy, instead of coming out and start throwing hands like Leonhard's defense is, McDermott was kind of come out, dance for the first couple of rounds and okay, he's working the jab a lot. Okay, he's really trying to hit me with the uppercut. Oh, okay, he's really trying to come with that right hook or the cross. Okay, now let round 4, 5, 6, let's start to box. Let's start to throw. Where I think Leonhard is more, hey, the bell dings for that first round. Let's start throwing hands. Good question. Comment here from Nigel. Thank you for being here. Thank you for the super chat. And he says, how much overhaul are we looking at? Ed, Sanders, Walker, do they fit? Do we need a nose tackle? Again, I'm going to talk about this in more detail in the back half, but this is an easy one to kind of address. I think Ed, TJ Sanders, and Deion Walker are still fine. Essentially what you get from Jim Leonhard is, and kind of compared to McDermott. So McDermott's defense, really what he wanted to do was a 4-down over front. We've talked about it a lot. Usually over front, all that means is you're getting a 3 tech to the the passing strength of the team, or however you're kind of designating like that strong side, like in that moment, right? And everybody was a fit. That's why you would hear you saying nose tech. I'm assuming you kind of, or NT nose tackle. I'm assuming kind of the structures and the pieces there. So yeah, TJ Sanders was a really good 3-tech. And then it was like Daquan Jones is the 1. Who else is going to be a 1? Deion Walker's playing a 1-tech. Ed Oliver's a 3. What Jim Leonhard does, Jim Leonhard's base defense is a tight front. So odd front structure. And what a tight front is yeah, you have a nose tackle, head up on the center. Sorry, I'm moving my hands a lot, so the camera's going out of focus. It's driving me insane. There we go. So you have that nose tackle, head up on the center. Could be shaded a little bit, but you have the nose, which is a 0, head up on the center. And then the other part of the tight front, you have a 4-eye and a 4-eye. So on your interior, essentially, you've got a nose, head up on the center, and then your 2 4-eyes are on the inside shoulders of each tackle. I think they need a true nose tackle from a run stopping standpoint. I think Deion Walker can moonlight there a little bit. I don't want him regularly working there. That's just me. I'm also, we'll get into this back half of the episode too, and I hope there's not a million comments that come through yelling at me until I get there. I think Deion Walker had a good rookie year. He surpassed my expectations, especially as a run defender. I still don't think he's as strong of a player as was kind of being hyped up this season, although he had a strong year. Again, surpassed my expectations. I was very happy and played much better as a run defender than I ever thought he would at any point in his career. So kudos to him. But his body type and the way he plays and his skill set and his play style, I don't think is built to just straight up kind of, you want that nose tackle to be where you're just dropping a stone in the middle of the defense and he ain't going anywhere and he's not being moved. I want that guy, right? I want somebody who can hunker down, anchor, mitigate displacement. Walker's not really that guy. He could rotate there, but you need a true nose. You need a true 0. Ed, I think, can play as a 4-eye. Sanders, I think, can play as a 4-eye. Ed is also kind of interesting. You could take Ed, you could stand him up a little bit, maybe as like a 5-tech and let him rush off the edge. We've seen that every once in a while in Buffalo. We saw that, I believe, in Houston in college. You could do some cool stuff with Ed Oliver, but I think he's a fine as a 4-eye. I'm still kind of playing in that B-gap world like he would as if he was a 3-tech, which is the outside shoulder of the guard. So similar kind of world there. But I think you could use Ed as a 4-eye. TJ Sanders, I'm very questionable on as a whole, but I think he could be a 4-eye. But I do think you need some stronger anchorers there. So I think it's at minimum, you're adding a true nose tackle and going from there. But I think you do need to have some more like of a stronger 4-eye run defense presence, some guys there. And then on the outside, we'll get into that with Rousseau. Do you do Dorian Williams as a, an end or an edge? And what do you do in the odd front structures and all that kind of stuff? We're going to get into that. Great question. Great thoughts. There are so many comments. I'm never going to be able to catch up to all of these. I'm so sorry. All right. I am going to, I'm getting into the live comments now. There's a good comment from Tilt as I just saw here now. I don't know what the question is you're referring to, but Tilt says, I think this is a fair question. Feels like to me there's more upside than risk, but just one man's opinion. There is certainly risk though. Yeah, I do think there's risk from the side of the fit. And especially with where the Bills are from a cap standpoint, I don't think in one off season you're going to be able to just kind of change everything around. I do think it's going to be a churn, ironically, maybe similar to Mike McDonald in Seattle, where it took, a couple off seasons to kind of get out the body types and skill sets he didn't want or need and bring in the body types and skill sets that he wanted. Now, what's a little risky here with the Bills is if you are moving in that direction, like I could see Jim Leonhard having success with the Bills and being a head coaching candidate literally next year or the years after. You don't know. So if you're committing to this direction, which you are because you've hired Jim Leonhard, what does that churn look like on the defensive roster? And how soon can you enact it? Is it a churn that's going to take a couple off seasons? And is Jim Leonhard going to be here for those couple off seasons and potentially beyond? You would hope so and want, because you are changing the identity of your defense and the scheme and the structure. They are very much built for the Sean McDermott defense, which, Eric and I talked about in the film on Wednesday. There's more sameness to the Jim Schwartz style than Sean McDermott. So I know people wanted Schwartz and people wanted Leonhard, but if you brought Schwartz in, more likeness there, right? An easier kind of, okay, let's transfer systems and schemes there. We're okay. Leonhard's is more of a I don't want to say revamp because of what it indicates, but it is more of a churn, and it will require that, which there is some risk, especially when you're not flush with draft capital, you're not flush with cap space. So it will be pretty interesting to kind of see what they do there, which is why it's a bit of a risk, but I think it'll be fine. Yep. Is everybody saying? Yeah. Yep. I'm seeing comments here. Ba, ba, ba. Yep. Wide receivers coach. Oh, D line coach, maybe. Yeah. Okay. 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 See some Chad Hall comments. Somebody said McJustments. Oh, that's funny. That's funny. That's funny. That's funny. Oh, yeah, as Joe DeRosa says, "Come on down, Big Citrus or Godfather Corleone." Yeah, Big Citrus, the nose tackle from Iowa State, and then Corleone from Cincinnati. It's funny, I started looking into Dominique Orange, who was Big Citrus, yesterday. They're gonna need somebody like that. They're gonna need a true nose. Also, they could use I think he only signed a one-year deal in Detroit. I'm gonna start banging the table for this person who I banged the table for last year. Yeah, Roy Lopez. He is a UFA. I wanted him last year for the Bills to play as a one tech. Um, give me Roy Lopez. As somebody like if you wanted to go on the defensive tackle market and get yourself a free agent, his play style, I would take Roy Lopez as a nose tackle right now. I'm going to plant that flag. I did last year too. I wanted him as as a one tech for the Bills. He ended up going to Detroit on a 1-year deal. He's a UFA, but yeah, you're going to need somebody like that, 1,000%. All right, all right, all right. So now, okay. Charles says if only we had a guy like Puna Ford. I am sincerely sorry because I know I skipped through like a multitude of comments. There's a lot of people in here, a lot of comments throw in there, a lot of comments being thrown through. I'm going to get to everything as much as I can. Circle back, but we're going to start to move forward a little bit. Yeah, Tonga too. That's fair. Okay, I like this. Mike says, "Go find me a giant Samoan dude to play nose tackle." That's fair. Oh yeah, Joe says I would take Tonga too. Yeah, Tonga from the Pats. He's kind of nasty. All right, let's get into Jim Leonhard, his scheme, structure, philosophy pieces. So again, base defense is a tight front. We talked about that. 4-eye, 0 tech, 4-eye. That is his base defense. Odd front structure. The easiest way to think about it, without getting too technical and or if they're using terms or things that might go over people's heads. You think about his defenses at Wisconsin. Oh, thank you for this. Great insight and breakdown. Subbed up. That's awesome. Thank you very much. Appreciate you for that. His defense at Wisconsin, you want to think about all like the linebackers that he used, guys who run the field a lot, right? It's like Jack Sanborn, it's Nick Herbig. Honestly, it's all the Wisconsin linebackers, like Andrew Van Ginkel and Zach Bond, like all these types of dudes. You really just need to get yourself like a Wisconsin East type of deal. So he is an odd front structure guy. Base defense is a tight front. Nickel defense, which he will get into. 4 down, could be an over or an under front, which just changes where you're putting the 3 tech to. He implemented both an over and an under. And that nickel defense, especially at Wisconsin, from a personnel standpoint, was like a 2-4-5. So 2 down linemen, 4 linebackers, 5 DBs. Again, everything for him is really hybridized players, a hybridized front. You're getting that kind of naturally. Yes, Leo Chenal, great comment there from Patrick saying Leo Chenal should be the Bills' first free agent signing. Yeah, it is guys like that. Guys who can, a linebacker who can play in the B gap and hold it. Somebody who can blitz, someone who can come off the edge, all these types of things. But yeah, so a bit of a hybrid defense. And in general, anytime you're in an odd front, you have kind of more hybridized players. And from the perspective of, I think a lot of people just know what a 3-4 defense is versus a 4-3, right? Your 3-4 outside linebackers, sometimes they drop into coverage. So they can't just be purely go forward rush guys. They have to be guys, hey, somebody who could drop in to the hook curl or the curl to flats, right? Some guys who could do that. It's not just, okay, all you're doing is putting your hand in the ground and rushing. So you do need to have a little more just naturally, right? A little more natural versatility and hybrid nature to some of your guys on defense, which is also why I like an odd front or a 3-4 defense, because you get the opportunity to naturally and organically have, pre to post snap picture changing answers for the defense. Because if you're just sitting there in a 3-4 presentation, you could be rushing, you've got your tight front and then you 2 outside guys. Like maybe you bring all 5. You might just bring 4. Which 4 are coming? Is someone dropping off? Or one of the inside linebackers coming? Like what's happening? That's just basic before we even get into simulated pressures, creeper pressures, and run stunts and all these things, or bringing a safety or any of this stuff, right? I'm very excited. He runs a type of defense that I gravitate towards schematically, structurally, and philosophically. So let's get into some pieces. I've got his core beliefs, want to talk about them and how they're going to funnel into this defense. So his core beliefs, and for those who don't know, I know a lot of people know he um, played for the Buffalo Bills, and then played for Rex Ryan at the Jets. But his big stop and change for me was in 2008. He went to Baltimore and was the starting safety opposite of Ed Reed. That's where he cut his teeth with Rex Ryan before jumping with him to the Jets. He was sweet. In 2008 with the Ravens, that team with a rookie Flacco that went to the AFC Championship. They beat the 1 seed Tennessee in Tennessee 13-10. I think Leonard had an interception in that game or a big fumble recovery or something. And made a couple good plays there. So he is a bit of a Rex Ryan guy, which I don't think should have a negative connotation. Defensive coordinator Rex Ryan is tremendous and fantastic. And his defense and Dick LeBeau's defense are what shaped me as a little kid and my defensive philosophy and what I gravitate towards too aesthetically. But Jim Leonhard, one of the big quotes he goes off with is he attributes this quote to Rex Ryan, who he even says like he may have taken from someone else. But Jim Leonhard says, quote, "Football is a simple game complicated by coaches." And he gives that to Rex Ryan. So starting off with his core beliefs there and tying into that quote, for Jim Leonhard, players need to learn to think for themselves. Becoming adaptable as a player is extremely invaluable. What he wants to do as a coach and what he thinks you should do as coaches, you try to expose players to the multitude of scenarios they'll face in games, knowing that you're outside the white lines on game day and they have to do it themselves. You are counting on guys to step up and improve in positive ways. You have to give them room to grow and room to think. I think that sets the table for his entire philosophy, where he is about preparation and consistency and giving players the tools to be able to grow and think and adjust and make plays. So it's about being prepared and teaching guys and coaching guys, but not so much to the point where you're overloaded and there's too much happening on you mentally to the point where you can't play fast because you're so bogged down in your thought process that you can't adjust. Like it switches from a 3-by-1 to a 2-by-2, where there's a leverage change or a formational change or a motion change. And all of a sudden, everybody's frantically trying to figure out what they're going to do. And you've got checks on top of checks, and it's too much, and it all just compounds. So he wants to give players room to grow and room to think. And there's a fine line between doing that and giving them what they need, but not bogging them down too much mentally. He's walked that line very well. His 4 core beliefs, again, tying into those quotes there: consistency, efficiency, flexibility, and response versus the opportunity to learn. So consistency, breaking that down into pieces. The goal for consistency: you want your players to play as fast as possible, as physical as possible, and as confident as possible. And he says the majority of coaching takes away from those things. So how do you get your players to play as fast and as physical and as confident as possible? It starts with your coaching style, being the same guy on a daily basis as far as your approach and how you handle your players, your communication, your energy, being that same guy on a daily basis. Teaching progression. How do you give your information to your players to learn a skill, or a defense? Is it consistent? Do your players know what to expect? Terminology. He talks about always making things cleaner. So like one word, players know what it is. It clicks in their brain. We don't want to get too convoluted, too messy, too muddy. Routine, daily and weekly, understanding how to get to the second level, third level, how to get to those next level things faster. And then game preparation. This is a great quote. He says, "We are very complex in what we do in many people's eyes, but with how I ask our guys to coach it and the consistency that we have in how we coach and teach, I think it makes it simple for our guys and they trust what we do." Again, I think this one's so very poignant and important. We are very complex in what we do in many people's eyes, but with how I ask our guys to coach it and the consistency that we have in how we coach and teach, I think it makes it simple for our guys and they trust what we do, right? So giving the players the tools, but presenting it in a way that's easy to learn and easy for them to go and think and react and play fast mentally, which allows you to play fast physically. And then kind of wrapping that up piece, he talks about what can you effectively get your guys to do on a consistent basis. Anything more than that is a waste, and you're not really doing your players justice as far as what you're trying to get accomplished. If you're not doing that, if you're not putting the game in their hands to let them win for you. That's it for him too. Again, that ties into the Um, giving players room to grow and room to think. He wants to put the game in his players' hands and let them win for you, right? And that means you are setting them up for success. You're preparing them well. You're giving them the tools to adapt and adjust in games. Sean McVay said something similar. I saw this on social the last couple of weeks. He talked about capability versus capacity, I think is what it was. And capability is I can give you a direction and you can go execute exactly what I'm telling you. But capacity is the ability to learn and understand that and adjust on the fly and be able to be fluid in the moment. I'm paraphrasing that. That's what Jim Leonhard is, right? Putting the game in his players' hands and let them winning it for you. And you do that by giving them good prep, good intel, coaching them, setting them up for success, but then not bogging them down and overloading them too much where they mentally kind of short circuit and can't do anything. We saw that happen more often than you would have liked in the Sean McDermott stead. So that's the consistency core belief. The next one is efficiency. He says this one's short, clean, and easy. Not a first in, last out type of guy. He believes that you find any ways as possible to do your job as well as you can and as efficiently as you can. Always challenge yourself to do better. Don't waste time. Doing your job, not just doing your job, but doing your job better and quicker. And how can you get your players better faster? Instead of getting player A better by year 3, can you get him better by year 2? Or, midway through year 2 or towards the end of year 1? Do your job better and quicker. And how can you get your players better faster? This next bullet is arguably probably my favorite one of his core beliefs: flexibility. So again, his base defense is a tight front. His nickel defense is a 4 down, over or under front. He implemented both. And usually that nickel defense, especially at Wisconsin, was a 2-4-5, 2 down linemen, 4 linebackers, and then your 5 DBs for the nickel. And the points within his flexibility: you build a sound scheme, and then you build in flexibility for complex problems. Less calls, more possible adjustments, which he believes calms our guys down. We can teach the basis of what we do. We can teach all of the finer details and then have minor adjustments to what we do. And this is very important. This next line I'm about to read, tied to the game planning aspect and the matchup component of playing an offense, right? Rather than have more on top of more, we start with almost bare bones and then add to a game plan based on what the issues we're going to see, based on how we can dictate. So that ties, and then he goes into that counterpuncher line that I read earlier in the episode to kind of lead things off. I love that, though. So rather than have more on top of more, we start with almost bare bones and then add to a game plan based on what the issues we're going to see, and based on what the issues we're going to see are, and based on how we can dictate. So he doesn't go into the same game. He doesn't go into different games. It's, oh, that's good from Chap here. Coach here, I said, it's not what coaches, it's a far they can teach and the players can use. I think there's a typo there. I'm confused on what to say. I have an idea of what you're getting at, and I like it. But yeah, so for Jim Leonhard, it's not, okay, here's a new game plan, stack and stack and stack. He almost strips it down. They almost start with bare bones, like he said, and then they add to the game plan based on the issues we're going to see. And that means from the offense, right? Are they a heavy personnel team? Are they a spread team? Are they a run team? Are they a run team and it's a zone scheme? Is it a gap scheme? Are they an under-centered run team, a shotgun run game? Do they work in pistol? How much do they use play action? What are their passing concepts? Do they push the ball downfield? Are they a quick game type of team? There's even more going from there, right? But when you take that game plan, when you start with almost bare bones and then add to the game plan based on what the issues are you're going to see, and then based on how you can dictate and punch them and attack from that first ding in the first round, that's what he is. That's what he believes. And again, I think that's what helps the players. Like he said, like it calms our guys down. You can teach the basis of what we do, teach all the finer details, and then have minor adjustments to what you do. So who you are is still there, but you almost strip it down to go to the bare bones of your sound scheme, and then build the flexibility from there and build the game plan from there based on the opponent, based on the matchups and what they do. There's the comment from Chap, from Coach. I figured you would edit there and there. It's spot on. He says, it's not what coaches know, it's what they can teach. So the players can play with less thinking and play fast. 1,000%. You can't, sometimes teaching more is nice, but your players have to be able to handle getting taught more, and they need to be able to put it into practical application on the field. Having a ton of different calls and checks and structures and schemes and all these things, they're only good if the players can execute it, right? And it's only as good if the coaches can teach it, exactly to your point, right? Like, it's not just what the coaches know. You have to be able to teach it. You have to be able to implement it. You have to be able to coach it. You have to be able to install it and adjust it and figure out the problems when, things happen to it. All of those things. Spoken like a coach. Well said. I like that. Thank you for editing it too. I appreciate you. So yeah, I love that flexibility piece. And that flexibility, I think, stems through everything for him, right? It's in his defensive structure. It's in his, the type of players that he brings in or uses or gravitates towards. And it's in his game planning. It's in his mentality. It's in his play calling, preparation, all of that. Flexibility. Flexibility is so important in today's NFL. I know it may seem like low hanging fruit or non-revelatory to say, or it might not seem important, but it is. Being in an ideal world, any football team, offensively, defensively, holistically, you are whoever you need to be every week to beat whatever opponent you're playing. If you need to be a heavy run team this week, if you can be that, awesome. If you need to be a heavy run team next week, but more gap scheme or more zone versus what you were the past week, awesome. If you need to be spread and go true empty or live in 11 or 10 personnel and attack an offense or a defense the next week, cool. And then same thing on the other side of the ball. You're playing an offense that wants to run it down your throat. You need to be able to stop the run this week to win. Cool, you can do that. You're playing an offense the next week that wants to throw it 35, 40 times and chuck it around the park. You got to be able to defend that. The next week, you're playing a team that has an extremely mobile quarterback and they want to go read option all day and do all this stuff with changing the math in the box. You got to be able to account for that. All of those things, right, tie into being flexible, being able to be like water. I love that quote from Bruce Lee. I think it's so applicable in football and anything, right? Water takes the shape of whatever it's in, right? If it's in a river, it flows within the embankment of the river. If you put it into a cup, it becomes the cup. Be like water. It means be fluid, be adaptable, be adjustable, be flexible. That's a hugely important thing in football in general, but especially in today's NFL with all the multiplicity you see across the league and where the league is at from a game planning and structural standpoint offensively and how the pendulum swings towards the offense and the defensive meta every offseason. You got to be able to go and be who you need to be each week in order to beat an opponent. And he's so good with that. So yeah, the flexibility, huge piece. So again, we talked about consistency, efficiency, flexibility. The last one is response versus the opportunity to learn. And he breaks this down in two ways, in the moment and reflective. So he says in the moment, this is where you have one opportunity for a response. This is, next play, next drive type of deal. If you're a corner, you just got beat on a pass, or your linebacker just missed a tackle, whatever. You have the opportunity in the moment for a response. You need to respond immediately. How do you react to that current situation of adversity? And once that next play or that next drive is done, it's time to reflect. And then when you're reflecting and you're getting to that reflective stage, it could be in the same game. It could be in the middle of the week when you're watching film, adjusting, right? Reflecting is like a debriefing. What lessons did you learn? How did you handle your responses? What was your response in the moment? And when you look back, are you going to grow? So what do you do in the moment? What did you learn from what you did in the moment? And when you look back, are you growing from that? And how are you going forward? So a couple other pieces. His man coverage principles are all about winning positions, eye discipline, and again, flexibility. I also pulled a quote from last offseason when he was joining the Broncos, and he talked about defensive backs having versatility. He says, quote, you need versatility, whether it's flexibility between corners, safeties, being able to play outside, inside. You can't hide guys anymore. You have to be able to communicate and think. If you can't play inside the numbers, they just throw their best receiver in there and work those matchups. So flexibility is very important. Positional versatility. Again, some of it comes with the hybridized nature of what he is structurally and schematically and all of that. We're going to talk about some of the current Bills players and how they fit or don't into this defense in a little bit, but I kind of want to put a bow on this section here. I individually am extremely excited. I am telling you why I'm excited and why you could be potentially excited as well. That does not mean you have to be. I'm not telling you to be excited or that this should be amazing, blah, blah, blah. This is also, again, like a little personal for me too. Like little me, I said this on the show Tuesday, little me loved Jim Leonhard at Wisconsin in college. I just liked the way he played. And then he came to the Bills, and I wanted him to get more playing time, but he didn't. And then he went to Baltimore. And again, for those of you who know, Ed Reed is my favorite player of all time. So during the drought, when the Bills would falter and look terrible by like week 5 or week 6, I would kind of focus on the Ravens. And so Jim Leonhard going there in 2008, I loved him, and I loved that individual team. And then he went to the Jets and was sick with Rex Ryan and was a big part of those defenses and how good they were. And then he goes to Wisconsin, and just what he was schematically and structurally as a defensive coordinator and defensive mind for those seasons in Wisconsin, again, when he was the DC from 2017 to 2022. Just, I've liked him for a while. I'm not big into like, oh, I've got receipts of my takes and all that stuff, but I found it during the week when I heard that he was rumored to be a candidate for them. I was tweeting about him in 2023 as wanting him to come in and be the Bills defensive coordinator. And it was tied to him, but also the type of scheme and structure and philosophy, everything that I broke down of what he is here, I wanted that in the Bills for a long time. Now, it didn't have to be an odd front structure or a 3-4 type of structure, right? I talked last offseason, I wanted Lou Anarumo coming in because of his matchup-based nature and what he was defensively. I like a lot of what the matchup-based defensive coordinators do, and that was different from Sean McDermott. And I wanted that in the Bills defense. And Jim Leonhard is a big step in that direction. And then personally for me, you know, what I like and gravitate towards as a defensive style, he plays that odd front structure. And then tying into it too, I want to bring up a couple last little notes and pieces. Again, hybrid fronts and coverages, really good and fun. For those of you who watch this show, the next thing I'm about to say is the disguise coverage bingo every week. Really good and fun simulated and creeper pressures. His simulated game, his creeper pressure game, really good. Fluid personnel adaptations, streamlined calls that have presentation complexities to confuse and attack offenses. These are my own notes. I'm just reading it off some stuff I had posted earlier in the week. So again, hybrid fronts and coverages, really good and fun simulated and creeper pressures, fluid personnel adaptations, streamlined calls that have presentation complexities to confuse and or attack offenses, match and rules-based coverages, good pressure packages for match and rules-based coverages. That's, you know, your, hey, I'm the apex. If number 1 does this, I do that. If number 2 does this, I do that. If it's a 3-by-1, this is what we're playing. We're keying this guy. You know, if we're playing palms, we're keying 2-to-1, all that kind of stuff. I just gravitate towards that type of match-based coverage, what he does. What's also interesting too, as I mentioned again, odd front structure, wielded, hybridized skill sets and body types, played a bunch of single high and match coverage stuff in Denver. So I wonder how much single high we're going to get here in Buffalo. Which I think would be a real boon to Cole Bishop, letting him play down and in around the box as that down safety, I think would be really beneficial to him. Not that he can't play deep at all, but I think his skill set is much better suited to be a monster man or an apex or a down safety in and around the box, going sideline to sideline. I just think that would be absolutely sick and very beneficial to Cole Bishop. So get him a true ball hawking, rangy safety to play the post and rock those single high coverages behind him. But you got a lot of single high in Denver. And you also got a lot of match coverage in Denver. And within that, I wanted to read this quote from Vance Joseph, Broncos defensive coordinator, on what his defense kind of was or is. Vance Joseph says, quote, "I don't call a lot of man. What we do is mostly pressure up front with matchup principles in the back end. It's like playing a box and one defense in basketball. It's zoned inside and match outside. These days, the beauty of playing great defense in this league is the ability to have different structures. If you can get defensive backs close to wide receivers without giving it that quote-unquote man tag, that's the expertise. Because when you call man, the player has to cover both sides of the route. In this league, that's difficult. Everyone has great receivers, and the quarterbacks are so accurate. With what we call, we're giving the player one side of the route, and we preach leverage. If you win your leverage outside and the receiver breaks inside, you're going to have a teammate there. It can look like man, but it's not man. That's the beauty of what we do, and that's the secret. This Broncos defense has been widely successful the past couple of years. I know the Bills have, gotten the best of them at times. And as the comment there, yeah, he also had Pat Surtain too, which helps single high. Very fair. But they're still able to kind of rock those match coverage principles and win. I mean, Surtain went out and their defense didn't completely fall apart. Granted, the opponents that you play and all that stuff kind of comes into play as well. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that it doesn't, but I just like what Leonhard brings. Sims, creepers, hybridized fronts and coverage structures, and match coverage principles. Again, you got to teach that stuff. Match coverage is awesome, but you got to be able to teach it. You have to be able to implement it. You have to get your players to understand it and not only buy in, but understand it and what they're doing. When you are playing rules-based coverages, everybody has to know the rules, and everybody has to know them in the same way, see them at the same time, react the same way. If we are playing a rule where if number 2 does A, we're going to do B, everybody has to see number 2 do A at the same time and know where they need to be and know what they need to do. So all of this, again, it's just more front foot playing, right? Dictating to an offense, hybridized fronts and coverage structures, fluid personnel and game planning, simulated pressures, creeper pressures, being able to attack the protection rules of an offense or potentially heat up a quarterback without having to truly blitz and still having numbers and coverage. But again, to do that regularly, you need hybridized type of players, guys who can drop, guys who can rush, guys who can, be the spiker on a stunt, guys who can be the looper, a long looper versus a short one, and teaching all of those elements and those pieces. But from a schematic standpoint, a structural standpoint, and a philosophical standpoint, I think this is exactly what the Bills needed. It's also personally what I gravitate towards from a stylized standpoint and what I want. And just for any defense, let alone for the Bills, I think this is a big, big move in the right direction. I said it jokingly earlier in the week, not to get into too much of it now, but I've been underwhelmed by what's happened with the Bills this offseason, and I've been a bit underwhelmed by a bunch of their roster moves and decisions from a free agency and draft standpoint the past several years. This hiring makes me kind of almost forgive and forget all of that. That's how excited I am about Jim Leonhard. Because of what he is schematically, structurally, and philosophically. But now let's tie that into, what hiring Jim Leonhard means for the Bills' defensive roster or personnel. It's been asked throughout the episode here. I don't think it is a complete like for like, as we talked about earlier and kind of alluded to. You need to have, again, even just off that basic thing. Oh, I got to stop. Carl. Thank you again for still being here. Thank you for the super chat. Carl says, which free agents would Leonhard want back for his scheme? Oh, I'm running everyone down here. Bosa, Daquan, Ogunjobi, Milano, Epinesa, Trey, DeMar, Cam, Poyer, Shaq, Phillips, Franklin, Savage. Honestly, I'm probably going to say none of these guys are a great fit and or great players. Ogunjobi maybe because he played 4I for the Steelers 2 seasons ago. Kind of what he was doing. I personally like Matt Milano, and, I like the way he played towards the end of the year. Epinesa, I think he's a fine rotational player. I don't think any of these guys are a great fit or are guys that Leonhard would prioritize having back. I think you could prioritize bringing Trey or wanting Trey White back and have him be your third corner. Trey, I thought, played well this year. Also, depending on what happens with Dorian Strong, you got a nice 3 and a 4. In an ideal world, Max is healthy, and it's Hairston and Benford who are your starting corners. I think, he could want Trey back. Trey is a good match coverage corner and rules-based and understanding passing off and collecting, especially in single high stuff. You want to play cover 3, and they're going to run a crosser. If you want to kind of let it go and then have that safety slice and drive on it, you replaced him, or you're collecting something, a crosser or a post or whatever's coming across from that other side. I think you could welcome Trey back. A lot of the, DeMar, no. Poyer, no. Shaq, I think, would be cool. I keep seeing Shaq, and I think Shaq Lawson, no disrespect. But yeah, I think you could bring back Shaq Thompson and Trey White from here. Maybe Ogunjobi, but I was kind of underwhelmed with that signing in general, and even with what he was at Pittsburgh. And then I thought he was underwhelming as an actual Bill. Daquan is a possibility, and to have him play as a 4I, I think that would be solid. Kind of going through. Yeah, Bosa, I don't think so. Daquan, I think you could bring him in, put him as a 4I. Ogunjobi, maybe do as a 4I, but I think I'd rather have Daquan. But then also Daquan's been spouting off a little bit on social, so maybe I don't think he wants to come back or is coming back. Milano, my heart says cool. Milano's a really good blitzer and a good dropper. He could play. Milano's tough a little for me from a fit standpoint. Yes, K. Morty references Daquan's social. So from these, I would say Trey and Shaq is where I would go right now. I think Shaq could be an inside linebacker for you. In like an odd front structure and a 3-4 structure, and then Trey could be your corner 3, who honestly could be a corner 2 and played like a corner 2 for a good chunk of this year. Good question there, Carl. Also, good comment here from Coach again saying, Coach Chapman saying, Carl Adams, DB coach from Alabama. Yeah, Saban world. Cover 7 match coaching clinic. Really good to understand some of the rules and adjustments. 1,000%. There's a lot of good coaching clinics out there if you want to understand match and rules-based coverages. Actually, you know what we should do? What I might do now, I'll see how the offseason schedule lines up, because now I have to dive into certain free agents and draft prospects that fit in general, in addition to just doing my overall evaluation. Maybe we'll do a match and rules-based coverage episode here on the show from a single high standpoint and from a 2 high standpoint. That'll be really cool. That's kind of my wheelhouse, what I gravitate towards, and match coverages and palms and quarters and stubby and special and all that kind of stuff from the Saban world, some of the Fangio world, all that stuff. There's a lot out there. Maybe we'll dive into that in a full episode. A good pull on this, Coach. I appreciate you for that. So now, what hiring Jim Leonhard means for the Bills defensive roster / personnel. We got into it a little bit with that question and that super chat there from Carl. Thank you again for your super chat. I'm going to start from the back end and go front, because I think that's the easiest way to look at it. I do expect to see more single high coverages, which again, I think is beneficial for Cole Bishop. I keep saying it. I think Cole Bishop is at his best in and around the box, like he was at Utah, using him as that monster man, apex, big nickel type of deal. Honestly, in an ideal world, even though I'm not ready to give up on Taryn, I would love for Cole Bishop to be the new nickel and have them go big nickel, and then you get 2 new safeties. I think nickel's always kind of been a bit of a skeleton key position for defenses in terms of what it can unlock and do. And Taron Johnson was honestly at the forefront of that for a while. Having a nickel like Taron who could function as a true coverage nickel, but then play the run like a linebacker was great. But now, with all the heavy personnel that you're getting, it's tough for Taron to play the run against a heavy or a Big 12 personnel, or 21 or 22. You have to go with 3 linebackers. You have to go base more and kind of wield that a bit. And so I think teams that have a big nickel or, a really athletic third linebacker, something in that way, gives you more fire with fire options for your defense. It gives you the opportunity to not kind of be outgunned from a personnel standpoint or dictated to from personnel, but also at the same time, I think it allows you to stay and play football situationally, which I think is where a lot of the league is going. Greg Olson did a really good piece on this early in the season, but offenses, they want to use personnel to dictate to a defense, right? Hey, we're going to bring on another tight end because we want them to bring on a third linebacker, and then we're going to pass it on them because we think we can take advantage of that third linebacker, right? Again, that ties into more things, right? Can that second tight end block? Can you stay in nickel? Do you not have to do that? All these types of things, right? But it brought up the question of like, okay, instead of matching personnel, just play the situation. If a team is in 12 personnel, but on second down, but 70% of the time they're throwing the ball on second down, stay in nickel because you're going to play the odds. You're going to play the situation instead of playing the personnel. But I think if you've got like a big nickel or you've got hybridized players like Leonhard tends to gravitate towards or bring in for a system, then it kind of doesn't really matter. You don't have to change out personnel as much. You don't have to go, okay, now we're in nickel. Oh, now we're in base. Oh, now we're in dime. Oh, now we're in a big nickel. Oh, like you don't have to change all these things. You've got the natural answers baked into what you already have. So I think big nickel is kind of moving towards a skeleton key. You look at what Jalen Petrie does for the Texans. You look at what Kyle Hamilton does for the Ravens, even though Kyle Hamilton is a unicorn kind of in and of himself. But I just think there is a lot to that, a lot of benefits to that move of Cole Bishop being your big nickel. Taron Johnson also had a down year last year. I'm not completely ready to write him off, but in an ideal world for me, I'd move Cole Bishop to big nickel and I'd bring in 2 new safeties. I don't think that's going to happen, but or so I should say. So if you're going to play single high stuff, and even if you're not, even if Sean McDermott's defense was staying and nothing was changing there, I think you need a more rangy ball hawking base safety to pair with Cole Bishop. Even more so if you're going to play more single high and you need more of a single high post safety. Bishop has improved there a bit, but that's not Cole Bishop. Let him excel down as a down safety in and around the box. Get yourself a ball hawk, rangy post safety on the back end. Hyde and Poyer could each do a little bit of everything, but to kind of put this into perspective from like a Bills lens or through a Bills lens, you need someone who's more Micah Hyde than Jordan Poyer to pair with Cole Bishop. I think Bishop is more Poyer than he is Hyde. Get yourself a Micah Hyde. Get yourself the rangy, ball hockey type of player who can cover in the post, who can do the same thing from split field structures, right? You're still going to play some cover 2. You're still going to play some quarters. You'll play some cover 6. You're going to play some cover 8, these 2 high worlded stuff, right? Some 2-man from time to time. But you need to pair Bishop with a rangy ball hawking type of safety anyway, but especially if you're going to play more single high stuff, put that guy in the post, let Bishop be your down safety. Now, again, can't be completely siloed because there are going to be times where Bishop, maybe you rock and roll your safeties and Bishop is the single high post safety and you need that other guy to come down and play into the box. So you still need, some versatility between those two guys. But yeah, I think you start on the back end. You need a starting safety who gravitates more towards range and kind of a ball hawking nature. I don't think that guy is on the roster right now. I don't think, bringing Hamlin or Poyer back is an answer for that. I don't think Jordan Hancock is that guy. Comment here saying Genesis Smith is a lock at 60. Genesis Smith, safety from Arizona, really fluid in the post, glides in the post, ball hawking, rangy. I started looking into his tape yesterday. Some fun stuff from him there. Kind of see what happens there. Oh, Charles says PJ Locke from Denver. Yeah, could potentially bring in. I wonder who you get from the Denver world. I have to look into their contracts and see who's a UFA. Usually you see when a new coordinator comes in, they start to bring in those guys who understand their system or who they know can rock. It could be a linebacker, could be a safety. It could be guys that Leonhard will bring in from his time at Wisconsin or from his time in Denver. PJ Locke is interesting. I have to look at his contract. I think he's a UFA. Potentially. I've actually been looking at, before Leonhard got hired, I was looking at Kobe Bryant from Seattle, but I think he's going to get paid way too much. But I think he could get the job done. But if you're going to play more single high, yeah, kind of taking a peek, seeing what you got. But yeah, PJ Locke, other guys from Denver too. I see, yeah, someone else said it too. John Franklin Myers is a UFA. Yeah, I read yesterday that I don't think apparently they're not going to bring him back. So yeah, who do you start to take, pluck from those previous stops from the DC will really be interesting. So again, back end, get yourself a starting safety who gravitates more towards range and ball hawking. Whether you're playing more too high or not, I think that's an ideal pairing for Bishop. Linebacker. So complicated, right? Matt Milano's a UFA. Shaq is a UFA. You're sitting there looking at linebacker and I think it starts with Terrell Bernard, right? Was his fall off this past year really due to the injuries or was it something more? He's not a good block deconstruction type of guy, which again is part of why I think you need a true nose from a skill set and play style standpoint. A guy who can eat blocks and eat bodies and help keep some dudes clean behind him, but also why you kind of need to reinforce your 4 eyes too, because it can't just be purely, run or penetration based 4 eyes. You need those guys to eat some space, to be able to play gap and a half, but also still shoot at times. Maybe even true 2 gap within that as well. The good thing is for Terrell Bernard, what's nice about Terrell Bernard, going back to his time at Baylor, Terrell Bernard is a good blitzer. So I think from like a simulated standpoint and a creeper standpoint, you can get some cool stuff with Terrell Bernard. Again, he's not I don't want him taking on interior offensive linemen who are, climbing to the second level and he's got to take those blocks on and stack and shed. He's never going to be that type of guy. He's not that type of guy. He beats them with angles and processing and beating guys to a spot. We'll see what he can do in that regard. But I think Bernard, before they were going to move to Leonhard, my thought was take Bernard, move him to Will, and let him kind of play next to a Shaq Thompson or more of like a Foye Aluakon, Devin Lloyd size type of linebacker where you can get more size and a little more thump and downhill ability. But I think Bernard could work a bit as a blitzer. Also, obviously, we know what he can do as coverage. So you have, the ability to come forward, but still drop a little bit. The rest of the second level is interesting. Like now, yeah, what do you do with Dorian Williams? We've seen them use him as like we've seen the Bills use Dorian Williams as like a Sam linebacker, like so essentially an edge presence against teams that go heavier. We've seen him do it against the Ravens, for example. And Dorian's got good length. He can drop into coverage a little bit. We've seen his ability to kind of rush, not as a true edge rusher. He's not winning with like pass rush moves. And oh man, what a great cross chop and great ghost move, or what speed to power and this and that. But we've seen them use him as a guy that they'll mug the A gap with and let him pick guys on games up front. And he is good coming forward because he hits like a freight train. He's got good length and he's compact. So do you use him as kind of a Sam linebacker on that outside? I don't think he's a great threat in terms of a pass rusher because he's not somebody that I don't think is going to win off the edge one-on-one, but you kind of line him up as that where he really is like a 3-4 outside linebacker as opposed to like a 3-4 edge or 3-4 defensive end is interesting. And then, what do you do? What I think is the other spot, right? So Greg Rousseau ties into this a little bit because Greg Rousseau is going to be an edge, but I think Greg Rousseau is your outside. I think he is your edge player. Like he's the off the edge 5 tech. He's the guy that's coming around the edge. He's going to be more of I'm not comparing the two and saying he's this guy, but he's more of the TJ Watt, right? I don't think he's going to be the 4-eye. He could be. I think you could. And this is, again, where the scheme conversation comes in, right? I think you could stand up Greg Rousseau in a 2-point stance and let him rush off the edge. He's also decently adept enough at dropping into coverage and doing some stuff. But I think you can line Greg Rousseau up in a 2-point and let him be your 3-4 outside linebacker, 3-4 edge, right? I also think you could kick him inside from time to time and kind of let him rock as a 3-4 defensive end in terms of that guy who is more sorry, I'm looking up multiple things as I'm doing these things right now. If you kind of want to put somebody at that 4-eye from the defensive end standpoint, I don't think the size or weight is completely great. I'd rather have it be more of a thicker, heavier body. But with his length and his ability to kind of play with leverage and muddy up the run, you could kick him inside every once in a while there. But I think he's more your 3-4 defensive end, outside linebacker type of deal as we have to get used to this terminology and all this stuff. I think Michael Hoyt, similar thing. We'll see how he comes back from the Achilles injury. He's another guy, 3-4 defensive end. Let him rock off the edge. He's another like your TJ Watt type of guy. He could drop into coverage a little bit, but you're letting him rock off the edge. He's a 3-4 outside linebacker edge. Javon Solomon probably falls into that world, but I'd like somebody a bit better there. Landon Jackson, I think, is a question now, big time with his fit across the board. What size do they have him play at? He's got experience inside from his time at Arkansas, but with what he was as a senior and then brought in here to do, like, are you looking at him as, do you try to beef him up a little bit and have him be a 3-4 defensive end? And do you make Landon Jackson a 4-eye? Or do you try to lighten him a little bit and let him play in a 2-point and have him be a 3-4 outside linebacker or edge like Rousseau and Hoyt? Or keep him at the same weight that he's kind of at, because I think he's like 275, 280. That'll be really interesting. Again, in terms of the fit and what you're doing with guys up front. I wonder all of that. I think the interior defensive line is a bit, again, not streamlined, but a little more simplistic from the standpoint of, okay, like Deion Walker, I think, could play a 4-eye and moonlight a bit as a nose. Deion Walker's an interesting one now because, he's always an outlier with how he's built and what he is. He's a mountain of a man, but he plays more of a finesse game. You do need a true nose, like I talked about earlier. You got to have something like a stone you can just drop into the center of that defensive line and play as a 0. So, yeah, college guys that people are referencing earlier, Dominique Orange, Big Citrus, the Godfather, Corleone from Cincinnati. Or for me, I'm looking immediately at free agency and I'm looking at Roy Lopez. Give me Roy Lopez. Put him at defensive tackle. Yeah, as the comment just came in there from IDL716. Yeah, you're looking, if you want archetypes, right? I think you have 2 of them. Yeah, Richard Seymour is who you're thinking of for like a 3-4 defensive end type of archetype. Or Vince Wilfork is your nose that you are looking for. Or Casey Hampton from the Steelers is one I always kind of go with there in terms of like, you're looking at somebody from a size and a weight standpoint, or a body type standpoint, or a skill set, or a play style standpoint, all of that, right? So I do think you need a true nose. Ed, I think, can play as a 4-eye. Sanders, I think, can play as a 4-eye, but I don't love his play style or fit now in a 3-4 defense. I think he's much more suited to be a 4-down 3 tech in a penetrating front than he is to be a 3-4 defensive end in a 4-eye in the tight front. But it's not horrible on the inside, right? I think Walker, you can do some things with. Ed Oliver, you can do some things with. Again, get creative with Ed Oliver, put him in a 2-point and have him be your 3-4 outside linebacker at times, and some rush packages, or on early downs if you think the pass is coming in a known passing down and distance. Ted Washington, another good. Ted Washington, Pat Williams, stones. You need stones that you can drop into the 0, drop him on the center, and have him not get moved. That's what you need there. And again, it's not just about being huge, right? But it's the play style, it's the skill set, the ability to anchor, the ability to mitigate displacement, the ability to squeeze gaps, right? If the center moves away, you're now in that A gap. Can you push him down and be in your A and squeeze the other one and be able to kind of steal those gaps at the same time? Can you, be able to pop and get your screws into his screws, helmet on helmet, bang, be in your gap, but peeking in your gap, but being able to play the other shed? Can you play gap and a half, all that type of stuff? Or are you truly 2-gapping, or you're just popping the center and you're controlling both A's? Are we lagging the nose and trying to play that way? A lot of questions, but I think the interior defensive line, the defensive tackles as they are now, can be moved enough on the defensive line in Leonhard's system, but you're going to need a true nose. I think you are going to need an upgraded 4-eye, or 4A, 4-eye, I should say, to really kind of solidify that spot, maybe even 2 there, but I think you can make do enough for the time being there. And then at edge, we talked about it a little bit. I think Landon Jackson probably moves into 4-eye. I was down on Landon Jackson as a prospect. I don't think, especially with how tight-hipped he is, he's not a guy that you ever want really dropping into coverage too much. So for me, I just don't like the body type and the player all that much. So now I think he's kind of caught in between, because I don't really want him playing in a 2-point and playing off the edge. I think he's more suited to play as a 4-eye. But do you want him to get a little heavier? Is he heavy enough for you at 280? Do you try to beef him up more like they did at Arkansas? Do you try to get him to like 285-ish and get him to play a little thicker and be a true 4-eye for you? That'll be really interesting to kind of see. Same thing with TJ Sanders. Do they want him playing at like a 305, 310, or do they want him getting down to like a 295 type of deal? A lot of questions with the body types up front. And I think it's all from the front standpoint is where you're going now. Because again, now you are playing, from what I anticipate they're going to do, you are going to play a tight front. So you got a 4-eye, a 0, and a 4. What's your 0 rotation look like? You need that true nose. I think Walker can moonlight there, but I don't want him there. And then what do you do aside from that? You kind of need a true starting nose, and maybe even another one to let Walker moonlight or play off of, or still do some 4-eye stuff with Walker. Ed is locked into a 4-eye. Sanders probably 4-eye as well. And then Rousseau, I think Rousseau is your standard 3-4 outside linebacker, 3-4 edge, however you want to kind of verbalize it. I think every once in a while, maybe you could kick him into a 4-eye and do some stuff there. But I'm going some comments here. Yeah, I'm not a big Dwayne Carter guy. I think Carter would probably be a 4-eye, but I'm down on, not even probably, he's not a nose. So you're looking at Carter probably as a 4-eye. I'm not a huge fan, but Hoyt's a good fit with what the Rams did with all the hybridized stuff up front, 5 down. Because that's also where you're going to look at too. Like, you're going to want to look at the Denver Broncos. You're going to want to look at their 5 down fronts, Wade Phillips style type of things, and what they did there. So your Zach Allens, your John Franklin Myerses, your DJ Joneses, your Nick Bonitos, your Jonah Ellises, those type of body types, those type of skill sets up front that you're looking at. And just comparatively, look at it with the Broncos. Again, because if you're not like, oh, yeah, I remember the Wisconsin defenses and their players from 2017 and 2022. Let's look at the Broncos the past couple of years, right? If you're talking about like an odd front structure, not that it's always tight, but, who's your Zach Allen? Who's your DJ Jones? Who's your John Franklin Myers? Who's your Nick Bonito? Who's your Jonathan Cooper? Who's your Jonah Ellis? Who's 96, who actually played really well, like Wizariki or whatever his name is. His name always throws me for a loop. Tommy Togiai from Houston used to. He doesn't anymore now. Yeah, like looking at those type of guys, and you just kind of play that game. Like, look at these teams who run these odd front structure type of defenses. Think like, okay, like, do we have that guy? Okay, do we have a guy who plays like that guy? Do we have a guy who's similar, similarly built to that guy, or from a play style or a skill set standpoint? Um, I'm going to be breaking all this down in a ton of detail and depth going forward. This is just to kind of wet the whistle for the thought process. Yeah, Jonathan Franklin Myers, you take him, you plug him in as a 4-eye, cool, you're good. Like, that's the type of body type you kind of want, and not even want, need. This is all going to be broken down in much, much, much more depth going forward. There's a lot of possibilities right now in terms of what you can do. But I think, again, what's good to say and it's good to think about is you already had to add body types there. You already, not body types, you already needed to add bodies. You needed a couple more defensive ends. You needed a Batman to Greg Rousseau's Robin. You needed another interior defensive lineman to play in a rotation with Walker and Sanders and Oliver. Even if you like Dwayne Carter, you still need another body on the interior. You still needed some bodies at linebacker because Matt Milano was a UFA. You still needed a safety, right? So you still needed a bunch of work at all these spots that are open for you. Now you just need to look more towards a guy who is more of a fit for Jim Leonhard's system and scheme. And again, keep in mind I see the comments here of like Myers is 6'4", 288. That's what Leonhard wants. That's the size of a 4-eye. Ed is 6'1", 285. Right. But I don't think they're going to get rid of Ed Oliver. I mean, maybe. Let me take a look at Ed Oliver's contract, but I don't think Ed Oliver is going to be going anywhere. And he's not going to play as a nose. So you have to look at him. Yeah, his dead cap would be crazy. So I don't think they're going to move on from Ed Oliver. And he's not going to play as a nose. And I also think too with it, like, oh, gotcha. You're saying Ed will work. Copy. Very fair. But I want to use your comment too. Like, I like what you're getting at and saying it, but I always want to make sure everybody, like, don't get locked into purely size. It's a lot about skill set and play style. Yes, certain body types, certain sizes tend to gravitate more towards, certain play style or skill set. If you want somebody to mitigate displacement and be a stone, Vita Vea works better than Ed Oliver for that. And if you want someone to penetrate and get forward and get after the quarterback, Ed Oliver works better than Vita Vea. So there are certain body types that gravitate toward, certain sizes, certain frames that gravitate more towards certain roles or skill sets. And, in terms of being stout on the inside or heavier on the inside, but doesn't have to be an absolute hoss or a monster. The skill set is important. The play style is important. Yeah. And I like your comment there about, John Franklin Myers. I liked him when he was with the Jets. He's kicked around a little bit. We're going to have to kind of address that spot. And again, it's not, you're limited with some money, but again, I think you could get Roy Lopez for like $3.5 million, $4 million and plug him in as your starting nose and you can be fine. Right. It's those things. So, and again, they were going to have to add to the defense anyway this offseason, right? Whether or not they were switching schemes or systems or structures. Yes, if they had the same scheme and structure, it would be easier, but they already had to add bodies to that side of the ball. Now they just have to add different bodies. They just have to add different skill sets. They just have to add different play styles to now work with what Jim Leonhard is doing, what he wants to do, what he's going to be, his philosophy, his play style, his scheme, his structure, all of those things. And yeah, I'm very excited. I hope you folks are excited. Kind of go, hey, RJ, what's up, RJ? RJ says, I think they could get a massive nose tackle and then have Ed Oliver, large human, Groot on the D line. Then you have Hoyt, Dorian Williams, Terrell Bernard, then a pure edge rusher on the other side. They are versatile already. Yeah, you've got some versatility with Hoyt, Dorian. I'm interested to see what they do with Dorian, kind of where they play him. Like, it would be great if you could put him as like an inside linebacker, but I don't think he has the coverage sense or awareness or dropping ability yet. And then again, with his length and physicality, you could play him as like a Sam on the edge, but he doesn't have the pass rush chops to win one-on-one like that. So it'll be interesting. But Joe says, is it realistic to cut or trade Taron Johnson? I checked and I don't think so, but Let's see. If they were to cut Taron Johnson, actually, if they designate him, if so you can only have 2 post June 1st designations. I personally was saving that for Curtis Samuel and Dawson Knox. A post June 1st release for Taron Johnson isn't the end of the world. You save $8.6 million this year. You get 2.7 dead cap this year, 6.7 dead cap next year. So it's still not ideal. But if you release him pre June 1st, 9.5 in dead cap, only 1.9 in savings. If from today through March 15th, if you release him from March 15th to June 1st, it's worse. It's a 10.6 dead cap and only a $730 or $730,000 savings, not $730. So it's a little more manageable if you designate him post June 1st, but it's still messy and muddy and it still sucks. And I'm keeping those post June 1st designations for Knox and Samuel as of right now. So it's tough to get out of the Taron structure, but this is fun. This is a fun conversation to have. Now you got to start looking at different body types. You start looking at different skill sets in free agency and in the draft. And I hope you folks enjoyed this episode and you trust me to kind of go forward in this, because now we're going to be diving into a whole world. I'm going to spend a lot of time on this side of the ball this offseason in terms of guys I think they need to go after that would be good fits and help them in this defense and kind of move forward and go forward. So I hope you enjoyed this episode. Keep banging it here for all this type of content throughout the rest of this offseason. Going to be diving into free agency targets, draft targets, in a multitude of forms and fashions. I am really, really, really excited. Oh, thank you for the kind words. Appreciate you. I'm really excited for this move. I'm really excited for this hire personally and schematically and logistically. I hope you folks are too. If you have any questions, thoughts, comments, concerns that I didn't get to, put it in the comments on YouTube. Not the live chat comments, but the comments on YouTube. Once this episode is done, I'll circle back and answer those. Get at me on Twitter at pro__ant. That's pro2_ANT. Get at me on Blue Sky at proant. No underscores there, just PROANT. There was a million comments in this episode. I'm sorry I didn't get to anything and everything. So sincerely forgive me for that. But get at me on any of the socials, YouTube comments. If you're a Cover One Insider, get at me in the Discord. Thank you very much to Pix MSG, to Carl, to Smith and FRC, to Brad, to Nigel, and Carl again for all of your super chats. Thank you for being here, but the super chats in general. I hope you folks enjoyed this episode. If you did, please, 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 and thank you. Drop a like on this video. Likes are the lifeblood of these streams. Drop a like on this video. Tell your family and friends and loved ones about it if they want to learn about Jim Leonhard or Bills news or football stuff in general. If you're on one of the podcasting apps or platforms, please rate, review, and subscribe. If you hated this episode, tell your enemies and try and ruin their day or their weekend by making them watch this episode and or me if you hate me or whatever you got. Thank you very much to everybody tuning in. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I hope you enjoy the rest of your weekend. And good comment here from Coach Japp saying not all 3-down defenses are the same. There are variations in how teams use their 4 eyes. Archetype is more flexible in the odd front with body types. Yes, 1000%. Good call. And I think that's why I think it's like interesting, right? With what they could do. It's like, okay, like TJ Sanders. Oh, okay, Landon Jackson. Okay, maybe Greg Rousseau. Okay, like maybe John Franklin Myers. It'll be interesting to kind of see what they gravitate towards, because we're in uncharted territory for this defense with an odd front structure, with this tight front, with the way Jim Leonhard plays it. We're a bit in some uncharted territory for the defensive line and for the linebackers. There's going to need to be some churn and some finagling at both of those spots up front, or really the whole front in general, linebacker, interior, and the edge spot now. But I'm excited for it. I think it's a good positive move. I think it's a good positive churn and a positive finagling that needed to happen and will happen. And yeah, I'll be breaking it down here on the show every single week, breaking it down on Twitter, breaking it all down on Blue Sky. And yeah, hope you folks enjoy the rest of your weekend. Thank you to everyone who tuned in. Questions, thoughts, comments, concerns I didn't get to, sincerely, please forgive me. Put them into the YouTube, put them on Twitter to me, at me on Twitter, at me on Blue Sky, DM me in the Discord, whatever you got. And I hope you and your family and friends and loved ones are all doing well and staying safe. Be kind to one another. Take care of one another. I will see you when I see you. Godspeed. And as always, go Bills.